gentlemen. Fired up for today's episode. We got Benedict back on our podcast, previously a radio host for 92.9 The Game in Atlanta. And his Twitter handle, for those of you that aren't following him, go find him. It's at JMB_CU16. He used to coach at Westlake High School under the legendary basketball coach, Coach Rogers. And he coached a lot of familiar names like Pac-Man and Cam Newton too, on top of his old gig as a radio host. So full disclosure to the audience, I'm a hardcore Falcons fan. So if anything comes off as bias, I apologize in advance. And, Jeff is friendly with the Falcons too. So we're going to have a little more of a positive sentiment than most when speaking about them. But Jeff, this year was really the tale of two seasons. We started off 6-3. We looked competitive against Kansas City, the defending two-time Super Bowl champions. And then we have a crazy win against the Eagles on Monday Night Football. Kirk looks amazing. He breaks a franchise record for passing yards, I believe, 509 yards against Tampa in Week 5 on Thursday Night Football. And, those two games against Tampa, I believe he throws over close to 800 yards, 8 touchdowns, and 1 pick. We're sitting there 6-3. We went 4-0 in our division. We're in the pole position as of Week 9 to sort of make the playoffs, win the division, and then everything just goes to shit. And we go 2-6 in that stretch. Cousins, I think, in the next 5 games after going 6-3, throws only 1 touchdown, 6 interceptions, 9 interceptions. And, after an uneven performance against the Raiders on Monday Night Football, we yank him, we throw in Penix, and all of a sudden we have a pulse at the QB position once again. Jeff, what the hell happened this season?
I think you have. I think the best way to describe it is you have a head coach who was scared to do his job. But, I don't know how else to describe that, right? Because do you remember how defiant, and I feel like this has been set up for about a year now, going back to when they were hired and when Morse was hired and then going into the draft. And it just felt like, as you kind of look back on it now, Morris and Terry, they were really defiant and had a huge ego with all of this, right? We're taking our quarterback now because we don't plan on ever drafting in the top 10 again. And, and cool, you're not, right? I guess you're at number 15 now, but, it just, going back to, what was it, after that third or fourth loss, Raheem had come out and said, you know what, we still lead the division. We're still in the playoffs. We're still in the driver's seat. Kirk has earned the right to right the ship. And you're going, what the hell, man? This dude has thrown 1 touch. At that point, I think it had been 1 touchdown pass and 6 picks. And you're like, you give him 2 games, maybe 3, but this is 4. And at that point, it's not even a quarterback controversy anymore, man. You got a young kid on the bench. You're shitting the season away. See what he can do. And he wouldn't do it. And, I remember I went to the Chargers game here. My son was home from college. And so my nephew and I went to the Chargers game, and you're sitting there watching that game and you're like, he can't move the ball. He can't throw a pass. He can't do anything. Why are we just sitting here not doing anything about this? And even if the young kid sucks, he's better than whatever you got going on now. At least you have an excuse, right? You have a kid who's never played an NFL game before. And instead, you let a game that you should have won slip away. And I feel like that's probably the mantra of the season, letting games go that you should have won. And, because you won games you shouldn't have. You talked about the Eagles game already. There were a couple others that you probably should have the second game against Tampa, you had no business winning.
The Saints game too. I think we got lucky with a
first Saints
punt
game,
or something.
right? The first Saints game you had no business winning. But on the flip side, you couldn't even get ready for that second Saints game, right? Mm-hmm. They had just fired Dennis Allen. They were on the ropes. You had their third quarterback in 3 weeks, and you come off off the bye week and absolutely crap the bed. And to me, it all came down to again, a head coach that, let's be honest, half the city doesn't want, unwilling to make a change to save the season. And, it was very defiant on radio. I mean, here, going back to 92.9 a game, there's the afternoon show here, Dukes and Bell, been on for almost 10 years. It's probably one of the most successful radio shows in the country, not just Atlanta, right? And Raheem Morris went after Mike Bell, who's been on every radio station in Atlanta for over the last 25 years. Very successful, well liked and loved in the community. He is he's one of those guys. He makes a lot of money, and he makes a lot of money because he shows you. But he is a season ticket holder and sits in PSLs that are tens of thousands of dollars. And Raheem Morris had the audacity to kind of go after him when he questioned him. Hey, man, you don't get to take timeouts with you. You had 3 of them left at the end of the half, and you decided not to call a single one. What is going on with that? Like, why are we still making those mistakes after you've coached 70 games? And he absolutely went after Mike, which was just, again, instead of saying, yeah, guys, I absolutely crapped the bed myself. There's no excuse for that. He went after Mike. And so, again, just the audacity and the ego that are on these guys after what happened this year is just, it's mind-blowing to me.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that sticks out to me, Jeff, I mean, you're seeing Kirk struggle, 1 touchdown, 9 picks. The game you went to against the Chargers, he threw 4 picks in that game. Our defense was playing so freaking well in that game. I mean, we only lost the game by like 3 points with Kirk throwing 4 picks. So and we had a couple red zone possessions that ended up in interceptions. So it's like you're seeing a kid, Michael Penix, throw laser beams in practice, but yet you're letting Kirk go out there and kind of I get that he got us to 6-3. I question whether or not Penix would be able to do that from the onset. Maybe not. I don't know. It's a hypothetical. But, I mean, as a head coach, you got to make those tough calls. And it feels like maybe he has a problem with confrontation. Like, hey, Kirk, like, we're going to sit you down and, just this is what it is and make the tough call. He couldn't make that call, and we suffered. But I want to go back to Monday night, after the aftermath of Monday Night Football. So we won the game. We beat the Raiders, right? Kirk doesn't look all that great. 1 touchdown, 1 pick, but the Raiders' D is just horrendous. They're not letting Kirk basically throw short, so they're forcing him to go deep, and we have people like just running wide open like crazy. Kirk just can't throw, and anytime Kirk gets sacked or is about to get sacked, it feels like he's about to fumble too, like it's just he lost his pocket awareness, or I don't know what's up with him. But what do you think was the final straw that broke the camel's back in that when Morris benched him? Like, do you think this was an ownership decision? Because I find it a little funny that shortly after Cousins gets benched, the Commanders-Falcons game gets flexed to Sunday Night Football. Do you think there could have been some like NFL like executives go up to Arthur Blank saying like, hey, this isn't it, man. Let's get these 2 rookies to face off on Sunday Night Football? Or do you think that's a stretch?
I think it was a culmination of a lot of things, right? Kind of going back to the first part of that, you talked about watching him in practice. Like, how do you watch that kid in practice and go, no, he's not ready? And I am all for, I am in that camp that rookies should sit, because playing quarterback at that level is not just about throwing passes. There's a lot that goes into that, and rookies are never ready. And you look across the league, and yeah, sure, last year, CJ Stroud had a lot of hype behind him, right? But you actually go back and look, he didn't have that great of a season, if we're being completely honest. Jaden Daniels has been decent this year. A 6-year guy though, right? Like, was in college for 6 years. Played a lot of football. And yeah, he had some exciting moments. Go up to Chicago, right? The rookie who was the rookie who was going to demand that he get part ownership of teams whoever drafted him. Didn't have that bad of a year, but certainly wasn't spectacular, and certainly had moments where he absolutely flamed out. And so, I get wanting him to sit, but then, as you move into Game 5 of that streak, you went 1-4, and obviously that determines your season. After going to Las Vegas, and there was a lot of, by the way, just as a side note, there was a lot of hype here in Atlanta heading into that weekend, right? Because the Hawks were also there. They made the semifinals of the NBA's in-season tournament, which was played in Vegas. So you had the Hawks in Vegas that weekend. You had the Falcons in Vegas that weekend. 92.9 sent everybody there. The other radio station here in town sent everybody there. You had a large contingency of Atlanta sports fans who were like, screw it, we're going to Vegas. Like, there was a lot of hope going into that weekend that, this was going to be the weekend that Kirk was going to turn around because the Raiders are absolute trash. And then you go out there and the Hawks get beat by the Bucks. And then, you get the win. But, God, if there was ever a win that felt like a loss, it was that one against the Raiders. And there was no, it literally looked like Kirk Cousins had completely forgotten how to play quarterback at that point. 5 weeks, 1 touchdown, 9 picks, 1-4. The division, you were now tied with the Bucks with the division. And sure, you still had because of the tiebreaker, you still technically led the division. But the two teams were obviously going in very different trajectories, right? The Falcons were not trending up, whereas the Bucks, Baker Mayfield was finally healthy again, and Mike Evans was playing well, and Tristan Wirfs is doing what he's doing, and it just, the two fan bases did not feel the same, even though they were tied atop the division. And I think somebody in that organization, and it definitely wasn't Raheem Morris, felt like there needed to be a spark. And I don't know if it was Terry. I don't know if it was Arthur Blank. I can tell you now that was the week that I started having conversations again with my guy inside. And he talked about how if the Falcons at that point, if the Falcons had missed the playoffs, there was an 80% chance that Arthur Blank was going to remove Terry Fontenot and relieve him of his duties. And so I think he started to feel some of the heat based upon the decisions that he had made of where the team was at that point, right? Because Kyle Pitts had been a no-show, had not done anything to kind of justify picking up his 5th-year option next year. The offense was averaging like 8 points a game. The defense had finally found itself, right? I mean, that was back-to-back games where they had at least 3 sacks, which hadn't happened in like 35 years. That's an exaggeration, obviously, but it felt that way. The defense was playing, had kind of found itself again, because there was that 5-game stretch where the defense came out of the year playing really well and then completely lost itself. And then that felt like that was the second game in a row where they had finally started to put it together, and the offense just couldn't do anything with it. And so I think you look at all of those things. I doubt TV execs had anything to do with it, because it's not like Michael Penix had been showing out all year and they were excited to get that game on national TV, because you didn't know what you were going to get with him. You had no idea what he was going to be. You had no idea if he could play at that level and lead a team. So I doubt anybody came to them and said, hey, let's get the 2 young kids. Because you hadn't seen the young kid here. Jaden Daniels, I think coming into that week, the biggest storyline was you had Dan Quinn playing the Falcons again with an exciting rookie who was on his way to be Rookie of the Year. And you had the Falcons who have a $180 million quarterback and doesn't look like it, right? I felt like those were the 2 storylines. And so I think that somebody in the organization realized that some shit needed to change very quickly. Or they were going to be SOL in the season and lose a lot of good faith, or completely lose all of the good faith that they had kind of built up during that 6-3 start, because things were getting hot. People here were not happy. People here had gone back to being ashamed to wear Falcons stuff. People here were pissed. People here were calling for Michael Penix, because ultimately, again, Kirk Cousins had failed to do a damn thing. And then there's just no other way to put it. He had failed to live up to the type of money that he was being paid. And so, you insert the young kid, and then all of a sudden you go, damn, he missed some things, but that kid can play. And I feel like that was kind of like the turning point where, now you don't care if you win or lose, right? Because now you know that you're going to get the young kid, and things change at that point, right? When you've got a young rookie and he's out here, showing out and looks like he's having fun and he's making some throws, and yeah, he missed a lot of throws in those 3 games. We can't say he was great, but he showed the ability to come back and not let a bad throw get to him. He showed the ability to be mobile. He showed the ability to extend plays. He showed the ability to make things exciting again, which this fan base hasn't felt in a long time. I mean, this is 7 years now of no playoffs. And you felt like, damn, you see this kid play, and it makes you excited that things are headed in the right direction.
I mean, Jeff, if Penix never got the nod, if we just ended this season with Kirk looking like absolute trash and ended up with the same record, 1-2, maybe we beat the Giants, we definitely lose to the Commanders, and I don't know that Kirk can get into a shootout with the Panthers the way he was looking. So, those 3 games that Penix played, yes, he missed a lot of throws, and but the thing is, the kid wasn't practicing with the ones till week 16, and whose fault is that? Is that's on the coaching staff for not really having him ready? But even setting it aside, there were some decisions that were a little, like he was a little aggressive that worked out in his favor, but showed off his arm, like that throw to Kaderil Hodge against the Panthers that looked like a freaking rocket. But it's like, why aren't you just taking the crossing route underneath to London? He's wide open. So it's like, he shows like he has the talent, which is really exciting, because if we didn't have that piece of information in this season, I feel like the sentiment in Atlanta, the Falcons fans would be ready to revolt almost. I mean, we were pretty much there with Kirk, but now, a young QB kind of cures everything. What I want to ask you about this whole situation is, as great as Penix looked when we drafted him, let's rewind the tape back to April 2024. When we drafted him, everybody and their mother was bagging on us and saying, how could you pay a QB $180 million and draft a QB? In true Falcons fashion, the $180 million QB didn't pan out, and all of a sudden it seems like we got something in Penix. So when we go back to April 2024, a lot of people, including us, we thought that they were going to take a defensive player like Latu, right? Who in that organization gets the credit for saying, nope, we are taking Penix 8th overall with this pick. Forget defense. Let's get our QB of the future. Who gets the most credit with that?
Terry Fontenot and Arthur Blank.
Wow. Okay, so Terry was the one that pulled the trigger on that. That's because you also said that Terry and Raheem, that combo is the only combo that would have led to Penix. So had Arthur Smith stayed, maybe it would have been Russell Wilson. Had we hired Ben Johnson, Slowick, Vrabes, or Belichick, it wasn't going to – we weren't getting Penix with that pick, you don't think?
I just think that when you change any variable, right, the scientific outcome is different most times, right? And so when I put that tweet out there that was the only combination that would have made that pick, you would hope, and the thought process behind that is the direction that teams go can be different under head coaches, different philosophies, different ways of seeing things, different ways of doing things. And so, the thinking coming into that draft from everybody, and yes, I got sandbagged a lot by a lot of people because, it ended up being wrong. But, the days after that draft, it started to come out that no, they were initially going to go defense. And then they decided last minute that they were going to go get their guy because of that run on quarterbacks. I mean, hell, JJ McCarthy goes in the first round. And those type of things. Bo Nix going in the first round, and yes, he came out and had a great year. But those guys are traditional guys who probably would not have gone the first 3 rounds in most years. And so that panic of seeing kind of like this run on quarterbacks forced them to go get their guy. Because the plan was they were going to try to come back into the first round at the end of that and grab him. But then that run started to happen and they panicked. And so, most combinations of head coaches and GMs are not going to do that. They're going to stick with their original draft plan, which is what most teams do. Most teams do not go, holy crap, we're going to punt here and completely throw out our draft card in our draft board and jump down the line. And so, if Ben Johnson's here, do they go get Penix? I don't know. I don't think so. I think they probably stick with the original plan. Especially after you gave almost $200 million to a 36-year-old quarterback. If you're playing the entire time, and that's another reason that's why to this day I still stay steadfast that they did not initially plan on taking Michael Penix, because you're not going to go out and give Kirk Cousins $180 million. You're just not, because that's a lot of money you could have spent on a lot of different guys to make that team around a rookie quarterback better, right? That's $180 million you could have given to defense to shore up some things on the front seven. That could have been $180 million you spent on getting a true blindside tackle, because now Caleb McGarry is your blindside tackle. There are things that you would have done with that money that you could have made things a little bit more comfortable for a rookie quarterback if that had truly been your plan the entire time, and it wasn't. And they didn't, right? Instead, they gave it to a quarterback, and now you've got the world's most expensive quarterback backup next year. I still stand by, it's just an assumption. It's not like I didn't reach out to somebody and say, hey, does this draft change? I just don't think that, and hell, even based upon just how stupid those two have been over the last year, like anything that those two have done has not turned out well. Trading, Matthew Judon for a 3rd round pick. How bad does that look now? Kyle Pitts, we can keep talking about how bad that pick is. We can, there's just a whole list of things that they've done together or they've done separately that have not turned out well. So, this looks to be the saving grace for them. I just don't see a different combination of head coach and GM making that pick with Penix.
A broken clock's right twice a day too. So I mean, they had a lot of whiffs. They've done a lot of weird things. Raw with his in-game management, Fontenot picking up Kyle Pitts' 5th-year option. But if there was one pick to get right to cover up everything else, this is certainly the one. So Now they have a little bit of house money to play with. Question to you on Pitts. Fontenot made the decision to pick up the 5th-year option. But as we both know, before this year, Rich McKay had a bigger impact and influence in the draft process. If we go back to Fontenot's first year where he took Kyle Pitts, was that more of a McKay pick, or was that Fontenot? Was that Arthur Smith, or you have no idea?
100% Rich McKay.
Wow. So
last year, after the start of this of the new NFL season, remember Arthur Blank had put out that thing, or the Falcons had put out that statement that Rich McKay had moved over to CEO of A&B overall, but he was going to concentrate on Atlanta United, right? Like that was like he was essentially, he was still checking on the Falcons because he's part of the competition committee. But his day-to-day was going to be worrying about the Atlanta United franchise. And it came out last week that he was indeed still very much involved in the day-to-day with the Falcons. He was meeting every single week with Raheem Morris. He was meeting every single week with Terry Fontenot on separate occasions, like he had continued to do. And that was a turnoff for a lot of the candidates, because it came out that I don't know if you remember going through that process last year, but it had come out during that coaching search that Arthur Smith didn't report to Terry Fontenot. Arthur Smith reported to Rich McKay. And people were going, what the hell? How do you have a general manager who the head coach doesn't report to? Like, that doesn't make sense. And the Falcons were very, again, defiant. It seems to be the word of the day when it comes to the Falcons. And Rich McKay came out and said, well, we believe that the way we run things are how, franchises are going to model themselves in the future. We think what we're doing here works best. And Ben Johnson was like, I don't want any part of that. Slowick was like, nope, I'd rather go back to Houston. Bill Belichick was like, nope, I'm not. No. All the guys that they wanted didn't. How do you have a general manager who you don't report to? How do you have a third guy who's going to have his hand in the pot? And that was a turnoff for a lot of the guys. And I think the Falcons kind of realized that after that statement, and then said, well, yeah, by the way, Rich McKay is not going to go worry about Atlanta United. And that turns out not to be the case. It turns out that he's still very much involved in the day-to-day operations of this franchise. And that's, sorry, but until you get rid of him, this franchise is going to continue to be garbage because he's just nobody. I don't feel like anybody in NFL history has failed up more than he has. That dude has failed into more promotions than anybody in the history on earth. And we can blame Terry Fontenot for things. We can blame Raheem Morris. We can blame Arthur Smith. We can blame a lot of different people. But ultimately, this still comes back to Arthur Blank allowing Rich McKay to continue to run this franchise into the ground.
I mean, Jeff, this goes back even further than Terry and Raw. I mean, look, McKay got elevated to the position back in 2008 when we hired Smitty and TD. So now it's just making me question everything. Like, who had the hand in those early Thomas Dimitroff drafts? Was it McKay? Was it TD? I don't know. Like, now it's like, what would have happened if, we didn't draft Pariah Jerry in 2009? What if we got Clay Matthews? And it's just like a bunch of like weird decisions we made throughout the years that you just don't know who's faulted. Like, there's just one common theme with all of Atlanta's failures, and that's Rich McKay. So to your point, I don't know that we're going to be a win. Sure, we have Michael Penix now, and maybe we could go on a little run here and there, but to sustain success over a long-term period, to be one of those winning franchises, I have my reservations. I don't know that the Falcons can be anything more than like a one year like wonder. Maybe next year will be a team that makes a run because 9 looks really good. Throw in a London, whatever. But yeah, it's just not looking all that great.
There's a lot of issues in that front office, not necessarily just with management, right? But there's a lot of personnel in NFL front offices, right? Like, there's a lot of different movement, a lot of different pieces. And the word is that the Falcons are going to lose quite a bit of their front office talent because, one, they are tired of the nepotism that happens here with the franchise. They are tired of even people who came over here with Terry. I mean, there's a front office person who came with Terry from the Saints, was here with him his first 3 years, and is now working for Washington, and has said, Terry is not the same person he was when he got here. This franchise changed, and this franchise, is not getting the same person that I worked with for years in New Orleans. And after that loss to DC this year, front office personnel started to put out feelers across the league because they're trying to jump ship. They don't like the direction that the front office is going. They don't like the day-to-day work that they're doing every single day and kind of the office feel that has been created all of a sudden. So there's a lot of internal turmoil that we may never see because most people don't care about the front office personnel, right? But there's a lot that goes into that. And there's a lot of people that have, a hand in the day-to-day operations of this franchise that ultimately spills out on Sundays. And so, there's a lot of issues that are coming out. And it's, of course, anytime I get information, I put it out there. But it's funny that when I start putting out that type of information, I start getting private messages from some of the big media people in Atlanta going, "Oh shit, you're hearing this too?" Mm-hmm. And the conversations that I've had with some of the big media people who cover the Falcons for the big local affiliates, the fact that I'm hearing things that they are kind of hearing as well tells me that there's where there's smoke, there's fire, right? And so I Arthur Blank has allowed Rich McKay to run roughshod over this franchise. Arthur Blank is also apparently grooming his oldest son to take over ownership of this team at some point here in the future. I don't understand as a businessman to have been as highly successful as he was building one of the biggest brands we know in this country in Home Depot, and the tough decisions that had to be made, because you don't become a billionaire by being happy-go-lucky all the time, right? Like, you fire people who don't get their jobs done. You are a pretty shrewd businessman if you're going to build a multi-billion-dollar-a-year business. It comes with the territory. And yet with the Falcons, he's like, no, I don't care if I ever see a Super Bowl before I'm dead. I'm almost 80, but it is what it is. Or I'm 82 or whatever he is. I'm probably my days on this earth are limited, but I don't care if we win. I just want my kids and my friends' kids to have jobs in the future. And so those type of issues, until you get rid of the people allowing that garbage to happen, fans are going to continue to be upset of the results on Sundays.
Yeah, that's crazy. The amount of nepotism that, it's probably not just with Atlanta, but all of this is spilling out everywhere, right? Like, I mean, you have Jerry and Stephen Jones, in Dallas. I'm sure a bunch of the Jones family members are in that organization. Not that they've done anything since the 90s, but I mean, to your point, you don't build a Home Depot type of business without confrontation, without being not only a shrewd businessman, but a cutthroat guy. And he's just not showing that when running the Falcons. So it makes me wonder, how he lets McKay stay here, and just stay within the organization where he's the common problem. But one thing we talked about, Jeff, all these head coaches, Vrabes, Belichick, Slowick, Johnson, they all kind of walked away. They weren't interested in our head coaching vacancy last year. But the media, at least with Belichick, reported that we turned Belichick down. So do you think Belichick's the one that walked away when we wouldn't, push Rich? Was one of his requests to get Rich McKay out of the organization?
He wanted Rich McKay to have less day-to-day hands on what was going on with the Falcons. He was willing to concede some of the power that he had in New England, right? Like he knew he wasn't going to be the president of operations. He knew that he was going to have to collaborate on drafts, which is fine, because if we're being completely honest, Bill Belichick's draft history is absolutely terrible. So he was willing to do some of those things, but he was not willing to concede, and Rich McKay continued to have as much day-to-day control as he has had. Again, after all of those dudes turned down the Falcons, all of a sudden now it was Rich McKay's going to go concentrate on Atlanta United. Because I think the Falcons realized, after that process, when you lose out on the top four guys that you wanted, essentially for the same reason, because it wasn't talent. There's plenty of talent, especially off, guys like Slowick and Johnson. And, when you look on the offensive side of this football, there was talent here. And you saw that, play out every week. Drake London is a one. Bijan Robinson, within the next 3 years, will be the best running back in the NFL. You've got some pieces, and then they went out and added some other ones, right? So talent wasn't the reason the guys didn't come. This wasn't a franchise whose cupboard was bare. The defensive side of the ball, you've got some talent on the defense, and just you need some fine tuning in the right coach. And so I think the Falcons took a quick look at themselves and said, "Oh shit, we got to at least publicly try to change some things to be more attractive in the future." But it turned out that those changes that they made turned out to be bullshit. Because again, McKay still has his hands very much on this franchise, and until that changes, they may make the playoffs, but ultimately, you're never going to win a Super Bowl with that idiot running this franchise.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, but let's zero in on the defense. So, in the beginning of the season, the secondary was balling out, and then towards the end of the season, the secondary kind of, started. People had their way. We had like Alamadi Zacchaeus going crazy on like our side opposite to AJ Terrell, and Bryce Young all of a sudden looks like the Heisman Trophy winner from college, at the end of the year. But after Atlanta's bye week, though, Jeff, they had 21 sacks, even though they got 0 against Carolina, which is still mind-boggling. Against the Chargers, they had 5. Against Minnie and LV, they got 3 apiece. Against the Giants, they also got 3, and then 5 against the Commanders, right? So, we're having games with multiple sacks where before then we wouldn't have more than 1 or 2. So something happened in that bye week. Someone made an adjustment to, free up our pass rushers. It felt like Judon was on the field less during those games. So what do you think happened there? Was there a defensive, was this Raw taking over the defense? Did Jimmy Lake figure something out? Why do you think we all of a sudden we were second in the league in sacks for the final 6 games? How does that happen?
So Morris came out and said that he was going to be more involved on the defensive side of the football. And then he just, again, I'm not at practice, so I don't know, right? I was told that Jimmy Lake rarely stays for a full practice, which is a huge issue for me. Raheem talked about how he was going to be more involved with the defense. And then he talked about how they finally figured out how to work together on that side of the football as a defensive line or front 7, right? So I think a culmination of things, the fact that Lake has not been fired yet is mind-blowing to me. You've got a coach who doesn't stay for practice. You got a coach who completely underperformed on that side of the football. And the fact that the head coach has not fired him yet because they're boys, to me, is a problem. But ultimately, I think it came down to one. Take a look at at the teams they played against, right? Look at the teams that we just kind of talked about they had success against. Other than DC, it's non-playoff teams, right? Teams that aren't very good, teams are going to be drafting pretty high up, teams that ultimately fired or should have fired their head coaches. So I think it was a culmination of things, but yeah, Raheem Morris said that he stepped in and was, being more involved on the defensive side of the football. And by the way, not that matters a whole lot. As a defensive coordinator, sure, he won a Super Bowl. But his defenses there in LA were never that great. He took over a defense in LA when he took over as DC. He took over the number 1 defense in the league, and they finished 19th under him his first year. And so, let's be honest. They won a Super Bowl, but it wasn't because of Raheem Morris. Probably just a culmination of things. 1, you played really bad teams. 2, Morris probably did step in a little bit, as he said he did. And 3 of those guys finally just kind of finally caught fire together and went out there and played well.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the coaches, specifically Jimmy Lake. That's crazy that he doesn't stay fully for a practice. I didn't know that. And you think about, when I think of an NFL head coach, I think of those guys that walk in 6 a.m, first guy's in, last guy's out. Sounds like Jimmy Lake's far from that. Is his job safe? Because there are a lot of nice DC names on the market. There's Lou Anarumo. There's Ryan Nielsen, who used to coach for us last year, who had some success under Arthur Smith's DC. And I'm just wondering, are there other DCs, even Jeff Ulbrich, who coached with Raheem Morris back in Atlanta under Dan Quinn? Do you think there's a chance that Lake gets fired, or is he safe?
So I've been told that that it's 50-50 on whether Lake is retained, but that will be completely up to Raheem Morris. So I think people expected it to happen. but there have been, so this week, Moore spoke to the media on Monday. Terry Fontenot spoke to the media on Thursday. And other than that, there have been zero movements within the organization. So if it is going to happen, there's still time. It's not like, changing. This isn't like college, right? Where, changing a defensive coordinator determines the type of recruits that you're able to sign or get commitments from, or out there having to go on the road and do recruiting. So ultimately, they can wait until March, April to make a change. I just don't know how you watch those last couple of games and go, yep, Jimmy Lake's our guy. Especially that last game against the Panthers, where you
5
made
touchdowns.
You made Bryce Young, who got benched earlier this year. And by the way, you actually go back and look, Bryce Young in the final 10 games of the season, or I think it was the final 10 games, final 7 games of the season, since I think it may have been since week 10. Bryce Young led the NFL in touchdowns. Bryce Young led them in least interceptions. So the last 2 months of the season, Bryce Young finally looked like that guy that they took number 1 overall, right? Like he looked like that guy that they thought they were getting, and he looked like he was having fun. But the dude, you gave up 5 touchdowns to the kid, and then you gave him that Sports Center moment that we've all seen a million times, where he throws a touchdown and celebrates like he's Steph Curry before the ball's even caught. And I know it happened the night before too, Lamar Jackson, but that dude's about to win his 3rd MVP, right? Like Bryce Young got benched. This kid after week 4, they're like, nope, this is not who we need. This is not who we thought we were drafting, right? And so you gave up 5 touchdowns to that guy. And again, the last 2 months of the season, he led the NFL in touchdown passes and threw the least amount of interceptions. So maybe the light finally turned on for him. But you got no pressure. You did not make things uncomfortable for him. You did not make, it was as bad of a performance in a game that you had to win. Ultimately, we know it didn't matter, right? But for the first 2.5 hours of that game,
it mattered.
It mattered 100%, and they shit the bed over and over and over again. Every time they needed to stop, couldn't get one. Every time they needed to get off the field, couldn't do it. It looked like Bryce Young, instead of being 5'9", was 6'8", playing backyard football against a bunch of 8th graders, right? Like it was a mismatch. And it was so bad. And after that, you're wondering, how does he keep his job? For the majority of the season, he looked like he didn't know what he was doing. And then you have all of the reports about how he doesn't stay all practice. He's not really all that involved. Like, are we running an NFL franchise here, or is this a halfway house for your best friends?
It's unbelievable the way that we just let the Panthers drop 44. And it's not like, to your point, that this is a meaningless game. We're trying out rookies, whatever, on D. Like, this was had Tampa lost, which, they were trailing most of that game, and we win, we would have been in the playoffs. Now, the most Atlanta thing in the world would have been for the Saints to win and us to lose. That is just par for the course with this franchise and all the weird stuff that happens to us. But it's just crazy, and hopefully going forward they figure it out, but I'm not holding my breath.
The Panthers had not scored 38 or more points in a game since 2019.
Leave it to us. 5 years.
The Panthers had not scored 44 or more points in a game since 2017.
Since they had Cam.
Yeah. And that was the 8th time in franchise history of the Panthers. I put all this out on Twitter afterwards. That was the 8th time in franchise history going back to 1995. Okay. So what is that? 30 years, essentially, 30 seasons. That was the 8th time they had scored 44 or more points.
Unbelievable. In a game that mattered, that's the part that drives me crazy. Like, the Panthers are the ones out there, by the way, on defense, missing everybody. They're the ones putting practice squad people in the secondary. That's why Drake London, by the way, went off for like 170 yards. I don't think that he could go that crazy against the top, like an NFL style corner. These guys are, replacement level players. But, it's just crazy that Bryce Young just resurrected himself that last game. And we'll see if that carries over to 2025. I mean, they finally get their first round pick. I mean, they paid off Chicago fully now, so they have their first round pick. They're probably going to make improvements. They'll be better, but we'll see if Bryce Young could carry over that level of play into 2025. Let's do a short preview of the offseason before we jump off, Jeff. The number one thing people are talking about is Kirk's contract. What do you think is going to happen? Do you think the most likely scenario is us keeping him, which Terry Fontenot said is a possibility? I don't think it is, but maybe he's just trying to play a little bit of poker. Do you think we cut him, or do you think we trade him?
So if you cut him, you save $10 million, right? So instead of paying him 37, you pay him 27, which is still a ton of money. At that point, now you're going to go out and pay another backup. So even if it's an NFL vet minimum of like, what is it, 1.2. Cousins, you can't just simply trade him. Cousins has the ability to say no. He has a full no trade. His family is now here. He talked about that was one of the big reasons they came to Atlanta, was because they were going to settle in Atlanta. This is where they were going. They lived here during the offseason anyway, but they were going to transition here full time. He is not going to want to uproot his family. He's not going to want to be away from his family. He's a very hands-on father and husband. And so ultimately, you're either going to have him as a backup, which at that point, like, you owe him the money anyway. Like, do you really want it? Because if you do trade him, by the way, you're either going to have to give up a draft pick to get somebody to take him, or more than likely what you're going to do is you're going to have to give up a draft pick. You're going to have to pay part of that salary all to get rid of him.
Yeah.
At that point, like, you already planned on, it's already on the books. You might as well just pay the salary and keep him as a backup. Because he's not going, the Deshaun Watson news came out yesterday that, his career is probably done, right? He's not going to go, yeah, send me to Cleveland. I'll go up there. He's not going to want to go play out west because that's a 4, 5, 6 hour plane ride from the family. You're not going to trade him in the division because, I mean, let's be honest, I don't know that any of the division teams need a quarterback anyway. So then you start looking around like potential trade partners. I don't know, Tennessee maybe.
The Browns make sense because of that Stefanski connection, but I don't know that they're going to put
nobody. Kirk Cousins is not going to say. Kirk Cousins put a no trade clause in his contract for a reason, and it wasn't to waive it to go to Cleveland.
Fair point. I mean, what you're right. Like, the wife's family's all down here. He's the one that holds the card. So unless it's a situation he can't refuse, such as maybe Purdy goes down for the Niners and all of a sudden he gets reunited with Kyle Shanahan, maybe that's an opportunity to resurrect his career. So it needs to be a situation that it, for him, makes sense. Otherwise, no point. And to your point, the Falcons, if they cut him, they're paying him anyways. There's no point to cut him. So you might as, if you can find a trade partner, then that makes sense because you can clear some of the base salary and that $10 million roster bonus. You can transfer that to another team. But in the absence of a trade partner, I don't see us cutting him. There's no way.
But again, it's not even finding a trade partner. It's finding one that he's willing to go to.
Yeah. That makes it even more difficult. Like, the Browns can want him all he wants, but is he going to waive the no trade clause? So
would you? I'm not. If I'm Kirk Cousins and the Falcons got to pay me $37 million, no way in hell am I going to go up in Cleveland.
Unless they rework my deal, which they won't because they're already paying Watson. If they tell me, like, hey, we're going to trade for you, I know a lot of your guaranteed money is already, like, you've already earned it, but we'll guarantee the rest of your contract. That might entice me if I'm Kirk. He gets motivated by money. He's a businessman. But
Sure.
I don't know that the Browns are in the position to. I don't know that any NFL team would want to do that with what he put on tape towards the end of the season.
Yeah, that's the other aspect of that, right? Like, what NFL team is going to go, yes, give us a 37-year-old quarterback who looked like absolute shit last year?
At least Rodgers started off looking bad and finished strong. So, like, you could make a case for him to go link up with the team and get paid. Like, he looked fine towards the end. Kirk just looked bad, looked good, and then just fell down a cliff. So, what about free agency and draft, Jeff? Do you expect us to, finally get a second quarter next to Terrell? Do you see us going after pass rushers? What do you think the high-level plan is for the offseason?
I mean, I'll be honest. I wish I knew. I haven't even sat down. I haven't even sat the fact that the season is already over is just it's one of those where you're like, one, where did the last 17 weeks go? But two, you're like, holy shit, the season ended and we're not in the playoffs. I mean, I think it was very obvious. I don't know that any corner got picked on more this year than D'Alford did. And I don't know how you go into next year going, yep, that's our guy, because he was absolutely terrible. So they should go out there and get another corner. They have to address the pass rush, right? Like that's, to me, you also have to go out there and find a true blindside tackle.
And pay that guy whatever you want, because you need to protect nines. I don't want Penix getting injured. So whatever the price is, just freaking pay him and figure it out.
So I think those are going to be the three big areas that they look at to addressing. And, you can probably address one of those in the draft. But you're not going to go get a blindside tackle in the draft. So I think that's the free agent move.
Yeah.
I think when you look at this draft, you're probably looking for corner too. I know everybody here in Atlanta really wants Abdul Carter out of Penn State. That dude's going to be gone in the top 5, and you're not trading up into the top 5. So I think they'll take a hard look at free agency. I don't be shocked if you see them try to make a move with Dallas to go get a Micah Parsons, because I know for a fact that phone call has already been made to already start kind of that line of communication. So I think it could be a really exciting offseason here in Atlanta for them to make some moves and address some positions that they didn't address last year. Raheem Morris has made it known he really wants one of those top 10, top 8 edge guys, and he would love to have a Micah Parsons. And the Cowboys, I know Cowboys fans were pissed off when I tweeted this out at the beginning of the year after they paid CeeDee Lamb. They can't afford to pay Micah. There's no money now. You paid Dak, you pay your offense. You have no money left for Micah Parsons.
Take the picks. So, don't let him walk for nothing.
Mm-hmm. He can come to my house and do his podcast. I'll create a whole room for him. You know what I mean? There's go get him. Give them whatever, if they want 2 first-round picks in a third or a fourth, cool. I think it's worth it because you're not going to find that guy with those 2 first-round picks anyway.
No, and that would have been our pick, Jeff. If we didn't take Pitts, Parsons would be on our team right now.
Yeah. So go get him. I don't think you're going to see them. Obviously, they picked up the 5th-year option on Pitts. I wouldn't be shocked though to see them get rid of him. And not because you can cut him before. So I forgot what the date is, but you can cut him and not pick up that 5th year.
So it's not guaranteed. Like they could still get off of his contract. Mm-hmm. Interesting. I didn't know that. Okay.
I don't know that they do that, but that's potential. I think they target their future blindside tackle in the draft. I think they try to address defense by trades or free agency. And then they'll try to obviously add some more depth to a couple of different pieces in the draft, and we'll see what happens.
So in the middle of this season, Jeff, there was a rumor that we were going to make a move during the trade deadline. Was that for Parsons or somebody else?
No. They that Parsons thing, that they reached out to Dallas the week that they re-signed Lamb, and Terry reached out to Dallas just to open up the lines of communication of a possible trade partner in the future for Micah. And they were never, they were never.
It wasn't a serious conversation.
I really wish Falcons fans understood that guys like Max Crosby were not available, right? What's his name in Cleveland was not available. Myles Garrett was not available. TJ Watt is not available. But you hear some dumbass put out some tweet with, hey, Max Crosby, doesn't want to be there anymore. Okay. It doesn't mean that the Raiders are going to make him available.
Yeah.
Myles Garrett, wants to go win now. Doesn't mean he's available. I want to win the lottery today. Doesn't mean I'm going to. People need to take a step back when you start hearing that kind of nonsense, because all of those teams, by the way, the Raiders, the Browns, they all came out and said, these guys aren't available. We're not trading them. Dallas has not said that about Micah Parsons, by the way. What you looked at addressing some of the pass rush of the trade deadline, going to get what's his name in New York who ended up getting hurt. Trying to get Smith out of
Riddick.
No.
Somebody. No. Oh, okay.
The kid out of Georgia. That's with the Giants who ended up getting hurt the week after the trade deadline. And I can't remember his name.
Yeah, I can't remember it either. I know what you're talking about though.
There are a couple of those kind of BC level guys, young guys that they were looking at.
Yeah.
The initial rumor was they had reached out to the Cleveland Browns to go out there and get Smith, who ended up going to
Detroit.
The Falcons were the first ones to make a call about him, and so there were, but I was told that Rich McKay's the one who actually stopped that too. It was never going to be for that A-list guy because none of those A-list guys were available at the trade deadline.
Yeah.
There were rumors, but they were none. But again, those rumors were by people with a Twitter account who just simply put them out there because all those teams came out and said these guys aren't available. So, don't be surprised if the Falcons are linked to Micah Parsons for a trade at some point here as we get closer to the draft. And they use some of the money that they're going to have, and they don't have a lot of money, by the way. But you'll see them rework some deals to go get a guy like him and put him on this roster, and I think the city would be okay with that. So
I'm sure they'd lose their freaking minds, man. They'd be more than okay.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
So if you were able to add a Micah Parsons and then change the uniforms, which Falcons fans want desperately, I think people here would be really, really excited going into 2025.
Yeah, I mean, aside from the fact that we might have the next greatest thing at QB, I mean, a nice pass rusher would be a start. Final thing, Jeff. Do you know whether or not Rich McKay wanted Penix?
I don't know.
Okay. Well, he just didn't have a say in it.
I really don't know.
Okay.
I have no idea. I haven't asked. I haven't.
If
even if he didn't
didn't
want him, it doesn't matter.
He's on the team. No, I'm just picturing him like seething in his office, like, oh, we finally made a good move, and he wasn't involved.
Right. That would be great. And if that was the case, hopefully, that would be a moment for Arthur Blank to go, damn, this guy really is a moron.
Well, I mean, look, if he wasn't involved, I think the way that we liked him was, or that we kind of like fell for Penix is, I think, what was it? Zach Robinson, Terry, maybe Raw was involved. They all went up to Seattle in that to watch him throw in the really frigid conditions, lots of rain and wind or whatever, and he was just zipping the ball. They fell in love with him there. I mean, like, Blank should be like, okay, these guys know something. They knew what to look for, and that's what it is. You got to trust your football guys.
And by the way, I think Michael Penix is going to save Zach Robinson's coaching career.
Oh, so you're not a big Zach guy?
I'm not. You're not. I think Robinson was absolutely trash for most of the year, if I'm being honest with you. I am not. and maybe because I'm not a PFF guy, right? Like most fans love PFF because they don't realize how stupid and how garbage it is. But he had some really mind-blowing decisions this year with Kirk at quarterback. But Michael Penix just seems to be the type of quarterback that he needs for his offense to be successful. And so I think Penix is going to end up saving his career and is going to make him look like an absolute genius.
He's going to save a lot of people's jobs. And if he continues at this trajectory, man, it's winning covers everything. So
100%.
We'll see. Jeff, as always, appreciate your time. You're free. Yeah, I know, man. I always appreciate you jumping on anytime. You're a freaking rock star, man. I wish you the best. And